A key may be worn by making it form a link to a belt. Now let's just, I don't know if you can see the picture here. Okay. Actually, it's quite dark. You see there's a belt there and there's a key in the middle. So the key actually forms part of a belt. Some people, if you're not in an area of the Erev, you need to have a Shabbos belt if you need to carry your key. Okay. That's the way it actually forms part of the belt. So it says there, a key may be worn by making it form a link to a belt. For example, a piece of string may be placed around one's waist with both ends of the string attached to the key. It is insufficient merely to thread the key along the string, since the key must form an integral part of the belt. Starting and stopping. Okay, this is still continuing with the.
So the key is to find the belt, eh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Especially if you've got a nice looking belt. Yeah.
Taking us a while.
The prohibition of carrying comprises the starting, moving, and stopping motions of any item. Each one of these actions should be avoided whenever possible. For example, taking a letter from the mailman's hand, even inside an enclosed area. Putting the letter down constitutes the stopping action. If, after leaving the house, one discovers that one is carrying in the street, then the following rules apply. If one has not stopped since leaving, one should continue moving, thus avoiding the stopping action. One should run to an enclosed area, preferably back to the place from where one set out. There, before stopping, one should deposit the article in an unusual way. For example, by shaking it out of the pocket or by placing it inside one's shoe. And B, if one has stopped since leaving, one should discard the article in an unusual manner as soon as it has been discovered. If the article is of special value and one does not wish to abandon it, it may still be carried, preferably in an unusual manner, but one must make a point of stopping properly every 1.5 meters. In such a case, it may be brought to an enclosed area. So you move for 1.5 meters, then you stop. 1.5 meters stop, because that's in a public area. Then I'm just trying to think of a way to describe it. Then it's not considered carrying. If you move only 1.5 up to 1.5 meters at a time, then that's it's not considered carrying in the public domain.
Okay.
So, but to avoid it, just don't carry any. Just got to make sure there's an eruv wherever you are.
Can you set up a human chain and move stuff around like that? I wonder.
Say again?
Can you set up a human chain and move stuff?
Yeah, maybe. But you need a lot of people on that chain.
Yes. Hell of a lot. Yeah. I agree. It's probably easier to have an eruv. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, guys. Let's get started. I'll tell you where we ended up yesterday. We ended up at 49A3, and there was a discussion because the rabbi said that a woman, while she's pregnant, appreciates and value because of her robustness, and that her husband sees that as more attractive. It's not like women of today where the less they weigh, the more attractive they are. So their criteria were different then. And then Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was saying that, in fact, so obviously there's the level of attractiveness she has while she's pregnant. If she miscarries, she loses that attractiveness, the appreciation in her look, and also that the husband gets compensated for the miscarriage itself. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel turned around and said, look, at the end of the day, the woman, you can't say that you need to have a calculation of both the miscarriage of the offspring, what the offspring would have been valued at, and the woman, for her loss of value due to the depreciation from the miscarriage of her body. Because he was saying, look, at the end of the day, the offspring is value, but even that is a little bit subject to question. Why? According to Rabbi, because, if you see, we have to base it not on the husband's value of his wife, because he's not objective. He loves her. So what would a maidservant that's pregnant fetch on the slave market or the employee market compared to a woman, a maidservant that wasn't pregnant? And you take the combination of it. Now, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, look, it's not as high the values as you think. Firstly, that's a very risky purchase or a very risky level of employment because she could die during childbirth. You know, the mortality rate was very high. People often bled to death. You had you had a variety of issues that created a very high mortality rate. And he said that it's a risky endeavor. So she's definitely worth more after she's successfully given birth than at the stage where there's a question in terms of her level of survivability, as well as the offspring. Why? Because the offspring, you could be getting an extra pair of hands working for you on the benefit of the offspring if it becomes a healthy child, or you might be paying for something where the offspring can die while she's giving birth or die early in infancy. So therefore it's risky. So for the mother, for sure, there's no appreciation. You pay nothing. She's just a health hazard at that point. And for the offspring, you don't even pay that much. Okay? That's Rabba's opinion on Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Rava says something different. He says, we're not talking about that. What Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Kev, is that at the end of the day, is that what makes you think that the husband's entitled to all the value of her physical appreciation of her improved looks as a result of being pregnant, her robustness? The rabbis say that's the husband's benefit. Rava says, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, look, it's her body that's also going through this torment of host and parasite and having to look after and morning sickness. And it's her body that's doing the work. Yes, he's getting pleasure from her look, but, you know, she's also getting pleasure from her perceived better look value from the husband. So they should share that sort of benefit. But the offspring benefit when she miscarries goes to the husband, and the loss of looks from her more attractive pregnant state is shared between the husband and wife. That's all they're trying to say. But there's a problem, because when you look at Rabba's explanation and Rava's explanation, they're contradictory. On what basis are they contradictory? Well, the one is saying, Rabba is saying, listen, the mother doesn't, you don't have to pay for appreciation damage loss, or calling it depreciation. Why? Because it's a risk. What do you mean she gets better looking? She's more at health risk. So Rava is saying, well, she does appreciate. You just share the cost with the husband and wife in terms of what the damager pays. So in that case, we say there's a contradiction, but there's no contradiction. Why not? Very simple. Is that the Gemaras can coincide because Rava is talking about a first-time mom. When you don't know how her body's going to react to a pregnancy. If she's had 5 or 6 kids, no problem, she's healthy, we can deduce that Rava is right, that the payment benefit from the damager is split between the husband and wife for what she lost in terms of her look value. Okay? Gavin brought up an excellent point yesterday. He said, well, how do you know she's going to give birth healthily? I mean, those were not healthy times. There's no antiseptics. There's a variety of issues. And I honestly understand it from Gavin's point of view, to be honest. But maybe they set certain standard laws that, in other words, Gavin, what I thought about your question is that they have to set laws based on the statistical probabilities, not anomalies.
It's definitely higher first-time birth, without a doubt.
Yeah. So that's what they're saying. They're saying that when you're in a society where everything was a risk, I mean, picture this. There's no antibiotics, Kevin. There's nothing. You know, you get something, Romeo and Juliet serenaded each other. They were like 12 and 13 or 13 and 13 or whatever, because people died at 30. So they got married at 13 and 40. Their life expectancy wasn't high. So in that sort of context, they had a pregnancy early, etc. So you can't say that mortality rate affected everything, because generally the mortality rate was poor all around. So you have to say, well, when is most likely that she could lose a baby? Well, first time around when you don't have a track record. Otherwise, you have to go on probabilities. Yes, it's less likely that you have a smooth sailing for 5 pregnancies like today with the medical care, but you have to work on those probabilities. And in third world countries, guess what? These rules still apply. All right, so let's now deal with the next section of the Gemara. I hope I've given you a summary reasonably well. Okay, so the Gemara now turns to the Tana Kamma's opinion. Who's the Tana Kamma? It's the rabbi's opinion, the general rabbinic opinion, who say that the payment for the appreciation that occurred in a woman through the offspring also goes entirely to the husband. Okay, so again, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, according to Rava, is saying that husband and wife, if she's no longer pregnant and looks as stunningly pretty, they share the benefit paid by the damager. The rabbis say no, that money is entirely awarded to the husband, because he's the one that's went from a pretty wife to an average wife. So he's the one that doesn't get the pleasure look, despite the fact that her body cooperated with it. So why? Why? How did the rabbis learn it? Because Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel gives a reasonable point. She also contributed. Because there's an implication that's stated in the Pasuk, in Exodus Shmot, chapter 21, verse 22. And that statement was, it says, and they jolt a woman and her offspring are miscarried. Okay? But it uses the term, and they jolt a pregnant woman. This is the term. So in other words, you could have had the statement, Gavin, these are the two statements. The pasuk could either say, and the guy's wanting to hit the other guy, and he hits this woman, right? And he jolts a pregnant woman, and she loses the baby. So it could have said, and he jolted the woman and she loses the baby. The very fact that she loses a baby implies what? What state was she in, Kevin? If she loses a baby.
It's depression.
Well, she's definitely depressed, but she's pregnant. In other words,
okay, so she's.
In other words, if I say that a woman lost her baby, the obvious inference is she was pregnant. You don't have to have the word. This pregnant
what state
woman,
was she in at the time? Okay.
I apologize for the way
I thought you meant psychological. Okay. Okay,
yeah.
so I was okay.
Sorry,
25%. Okay.
Okay, it was my fault. So what we're saying is there's a superfluous word. Superfluous meaning you can still get the gist of it without the unnecessary word pregnancy. Because if you say a woman loses her baby from being punched, she's obviously pregnant. So the very fact that it says a pregnant woman loses her baby being punched, what does that extra word come to teach? Because there are no wasted words in the Torah. There's a Gezerah Shava. Well, that word is used to say that the payment for the woman's appreciation through pregnancy goes to the husband, okay? Because basically the verse states that payment for the loss of the offspring is awarded to the husband, and the word pregnant teaches that this includes the payment for the appreciation that pregnancy had brought the woman and was lost through miscarriage. So all it's saying is that word pregnancy is saying just like for the offspring, the husband receives the reward. For her state of pregnancy, the husband receives the reward. That's the word pregnancy. That's how the rabbis use that extra word to teach us that he gets the entire share of not only the offspring, but her increased sexual appeal or robustness, whatever you'd like to call it. So that's the rabbi source. So the question then is going to be, well, how does then Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, according to Rava, what does he use that word, extra word pregnant for? Again, it's a superfluous word. It's unnecessary. So he must Doirish or get some sort of meaning out of it. So what does he attribute the meaning to in order that that word is used productively? So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel will teach you that basically he holds according to a brisa which says, Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov said, one is never liable to pay the value of offspring whose loss he brings about unless he strikes the pregnant woman opposite the womb. Okay? So Rava, in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, learns a brisa at which Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov holds, because they both hold the same opinion, that basically the phrase, and they jolt a pregnant woman, teaches that they are liable to pay for the offspring only if they like strike her in the place of her pregnancy. Okay, so it's got to be like in the place that could actually, physiologically create that sort of loss. That's what the word is used for. Okay, so the brisa, now we have to clarify this brisa by Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov, and Rav Papa opinion said, do not say that this means that one must strike her literally opposite the womb. Rather, if one strikes the woman anywhere from the heat of the blow which reaches the child, that, in other words, guys, it's anywhere in the torso and causes a miscarriage, he's liable to pay for the offspring. So, in other words, Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov said it has to be at a specific place according to a womb. And Rav Papa is saying, look, anywhere in the torso could cause it, because that affects the child where it could get its nutrition from. It could put the body into shock. It does have an effect. It doesn't have to be right dead on her stomach. It could be on the side of her stomach or upward blow, whatever the case may be. The torso is a sensitive area, and that can shock the child and cause a miscarriage. So the brisa, according to Rav Papa, only means to exclude one who strikes her hand or her foot, to teach that he's not liable to pay for the offspring if she miscarries as a result of a blow to her extremities. Okay. So what we're saying is, say the guy picks up a bar stool and wants to clap the guy and cracks the guy, and he ducks, and he hits this pregnant woman on the hand and breaks her arm. Does that have anything to do with the fact that it could put her body into shock and have a miscarriage? Yes or no?
Did he just smack the bar stool, or did he hit her? I didn't hear.
No.
He hit the hand. He broke her hand.
So I'm saying, I pick up a bar stool, I'm going to clap somebody, and the wife puts her hand in the way and says, no, don't hit my husband or whatever, right? And it breaks her hand.
That one impacts the baby.
Yeah, so Rav Papa says if she loses the baby on that basis, it was a timing coincidence. You can't say that that caused direct bodily shock. It's got to be on the torso area, somewhere that makes sense. Okay, so, but just one thing to note is that the rabbis don't say they need that word pregnant to show that feature, because they say it's logical. They say, what do you think? We don't pay for grandma indirect damage. She gets damaged on the hand. What makes you think, if she had a miscarriage at the time, that we would put two and two together? It's obvious. But the Gemara needs some exposition at which Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's got a logical explanation. Okay. So that's his opinion. So again, in summary, the Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's got a good point. He said, listen, the woman goes through a pregnancy. It's a big ordeal. She looks good for her husband. She's gone through a lot. Husband's enjoying the look. The miscarriage affects them both, because her self-esteem goes when she doesn't look as pretty for the husband. They share the payment. It says, sounds good to me. What do the rabbis have to say? The rabbis have to say, look, we learn it from that extra word pregnant. They jolt a pregnant woman and she loses her baby. So the word pregnant isn't necessary. If you say the woman loses a baby, obviously she's pregnant. So the word pregnant is juxtaposition, just like the husband is paid for the pregnancy loss in terms of the offspring, so he's paid for the loss of appreciation due to the pregnancy loss. Okay? So they say to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in response, so what have you to say with that? What are you going to do with that extra word pregnant? He said, look, this is how I learn. I learned that word is saying that in order to make him liable, the damager, is she has to be hit in an area which is relevant to pregnancy. In other words, on the area that's vulnerable to the child. And Rav Papa is saying, yes, it doesn't even have to be in the exact spot. According to what we've learned, because Rav Eliezer ben Yaakov is very specific, opposite to womb, whereas Rav Papa says, listen, anywhere in the womb area or the torso can cause it shock. All right, guys, that's the summary of that. So now we're going into the next part. Okay, so we're on 49a4. The Mishnah states, now to go into the next part of the Mishnah, if she was a Canaanite maidservant who had been emancipated, in other words, freed, recently freed, and had married an emancipated Canaanite slave. Why is she recently freed? Because only at the point of recently being freed can the person she marries derive the benefit. Otherwise, she's seen as property, and the owner, her slave master, derives the benefit of her loss of pregnancy because he lost her offspring, which would have served him. So she was recently married, okay? Why is there another reason, Kevin, why she had used the word emancipated is in the term recent, is because if she'd been freed for a while, she would have been married for a while, right? In other words, generally, if a woman was a maidservant, she'd marry somebody that was a slave because she wouldn't have rights to her children, neither would the slave. So they breed for the master, okay? And they get to see their children, but they indentured servitude, okay? But the minute she's freed, she's going to, if she's not married, look for a husband that is free. But even if he was enslaved and she's freed, the slave master is not entitled to keep her children then. Do you know what I mean? In other words, the male slave has to then impregnate the slave master's other female maidservants, in addition to his wife, or whatever the case may be. But the point of it is, if the wife's free, her children are no longer indentured in terms of servitude. So, which means, as long as she's free, and why do we say recently married? Not because she's free and then suddenly married somebody that was single, is that generally slaves would marry slaves, converts would marry converts, because you marry according to your life station often, or according to your circumstances. And had she been married for a long time, he would have had children already. So therefore he has heirs. The husband would have had heirs. And any payment that would have been accrued to him would have been inherited to his heirs upon his death. So we're talking about a recently emancipated maidservant, and in that particular case, probably recently married. Therefore, they don't have heirs. This is her first baby. So in that particular case, let me just tell you where we're holding. In that particular case, if she was a Canaanite maidservant who had been emancipated and had married an emancipated Canaanite slave, because apparently then he has to also be free. Why? Because then I don't think any of the rights can go to the owner, the slave owner. Or she was a convert to Judaism and had married a male convert. And in either case, the husband died without leaving any heirs. The damage is exempt from paying the value of the offspring. Okay, makes sense?
No, I would think that it should go to the wife, but according to what the rabbis say, it makes sense.
Yeah, listen, there's no argument, even according to a woman that's free and Jewish and everything else, the offspring goes to the husband.
Yes, I'm saying the husband's not allowed. It should regardless go to the...
on what basis?
Well, the guy's done damage. He needs to pay, and it should go to the woman's also suffered. I think she should get it. It's similar to that argument where it should be split 50-50. So I'm saying should go to the husband according to what the rabbis say, but if she's not allowed, just my humble opinion, I would have suggested.
You know what, Kevin? On a personal basis, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Can I say something here, Damon?
Sure.
Maybe there are no heirs. No, I might be wrong here. Maybe heirs have to be Halakhic Jews, and if she's an emancipated slave and he's an emancipated slave and they didn't convert, then their children are not classified as heirs.
Yeah, listen, that's
according to Jewish law, maybe.
That's one of the issues we're going to deal with. But I know what Gavin's saying is at the end of the day, if you look at any modern family, if somebody loses a child at the irresponsibility of another, they're both entitled to get compensation, to share it, because there's a deep, devastating loss. So I completely see it from Gavin's perspective, but my job is just to teach over what the law is. But Gavin, I'm with you on this one. I'm sure Kevin is too.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. But okay. Yeah, there's other we have to go with the rabbi.
Okay, so the ruling now is qualified. Rabba, R-A-B-B-A-H, Rabba said, they taught this only in a case concerning where the damages struck her during the lifetime of her husband, the convert, and then the convert then died. For since he struck her and caused her to miscarry during the convert's lifetime, the convert acquired the debt of the value of the offspring. Okay, what do you mean the debt of the value of the offspring? But in other words, at that point, it immediately became payable to him directly, to his account. But if he struck the woman after the death of the husband, the convert, she had already acquired the offspring. She is carrying at the moment of her husband's death. Okay, and the damage is therefore liable to pay her their value when he subsequently damaged them. Okay, so in other words, what we're saying is basically that the offspring, the payment of the offspring, it's a payment, goes into the husband's bank account while he's alive. So when it goes into the husband's bank account while he's alive, she doesn't have access to that bank account, call it, or his assets. Those assets are dealt with like any other assets that get distributed. That's the thing, Gavin. They're seeing it in different terms. They see it as this is the wife's assets, this is the husband's assets. And when the husband dies, that payment goes directly into his account. So the husband's got a whole lot of assets at which some is entitled to go to his wife and some of those assets to his children. That's all it is. It's an issue of an estate. It's an estate issue now. But had she been pregnant, but he died, say she was 3 months pregnant and he died, and she was sitting at the bar waiting for her brother, and somebody had a fight with her brother and missed the brother and hit her, then all the money would go to her according to Rabba, because it never got transferred to the husband's estate. This damage occurred after he died, before she gave birth.
Okay, so then I'm with Rabba on that. So that's actually, he agrees with me, basically. That's okay then. That's what I'm saying. I understand if once it's gone into his estate, there's nothing you can do. Trust me, I've been down that direction.
Yeah. So that's basically what we're dealing with. All right. So then what we're going to say is another objection is raised. Okay. So basically, Rav Chisda said, master of this teaching are offspring bundles of money that she should be able to acquire them when her husband dies in the manner that one acquires ordinary ownerless property, meaning basically that according to Rashi's explanation, Rav Chisda argues that although the husband is ordinarily paid the value of the lost offspring, it's not because he owns them, but because Hashem, the merciful one, saw fit to let him be compensated for the loss of an heir. And therefore, in other words, it was an heir to carry his name, his surname. And if he died and left heirs, the heir stands in his place to inherit the right to receive the compensation. Okay? So in other words, what Rav Chisda is saying is it's not like other property that she can inherit from any state or is entitled to, that it can go into a joint account. Rather, the law is as follows. If the husband is here when the offspring are killed, the merciful one awarded him the payment of their value. But if the husband is not here when the offspring are killed, the merciful one did not award the payment to anyone. So Rav Chisda is arguing with Rabba, okay? Because Rav Chisda doesn't see it as a reparation for the loss of the husband's property, since he doesn't actually own the children. Okay, he wasn't alive that the children were born; they weren't his assets, etc. So having possession of the fetuses while they are alive do not give him or anybody else the right to payment, because there's no value in it, he's saying. Rather, the right to payment is initiated only at the time of the fetus's death by the merciful one's decree that the father be compensated in this manner. If he's alive, the decree is awarded to him, and the payment comes due. But if he died but left heirs, then even if the mishap occurred after his death, the decree is applicable because the heirs are an extension of him. Okay, but if he's gone and has no heirs, the merciful one's decree is inapplicable, since nobody is able to acquire this right